everyone. Thanks for tuning in again. Today I had the pleasure of speaking with Pastor Keith Davis and his wife Laura from the URC, the United Reformed Church on the west side of the city here in Calgary. Unfortunately, we don't quite have enough local guests here in Calgary to warrant a full in-person studio, but it was a pleasure to speak with them virtually and to understand the work that they've done for years here in Calgary with the Summit Conference. Pastor Keith Davis was called to the URC here, Bethel URC, about 10 years ago, and pretty early on in his ministry recognized a need for a youth conference, connecting the youth, not just in Calgary, but across Western Canada and even into the States. Our churches here are fairly spread apart geographically, and connecting the youth both relationally, but also spiritually, is a real need. And this is what the Summit Conference has really done a really good job of over the years, connecting young people across Western Canada. So we talk about how the conference was born, the ideas, the goals, the vision that they had back in 2014, 15, 16 as it got off the ground, and then now as they've grown to quite a substantial number of attendees every year, and also brought on a new young adults conference in the winter to serve the young people from our churches. We talk about the goals, but we also talk about how Summit has expanded over the years and how God has blessed it and how it could possibly be a blessing to other youth conference groups across the country, and how Summit really serves the youth in our congregation in a way that is needed. So hopefully you enjoy this conversation. Without further ado, here's Pastor Keith Davis and his wife, Laura. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us on Real Talk again. Today we got an episode. We're talking about youth conferences, about Summit here in Calgary, and more broadly about serving youth in our church. And we're joined by Pastor Keith Davis and his wife, Laura. So we appreciate you joining us for this conversation. So welcome. And if you don't mind, introduce yourself, a bit of a background, I guess, and how you landed here in Calgary.
Sure. And I'll let Laura fill in some blanks here too. I'm Pastor Keith Davis. I'm a minister in the United Reformed Churches, North America. I've been serving the church in Calgary for about almost 10 years now. So we moved here. It'll be January, 2020. What was it?
2015.
15. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're excited about that. And we're both from the Chicagoland area, south suburbs of Chicago. When we were asked to come up here, one of the things that the search committee said they kind of wanted to find was a pastor in a similar situation as to what the church here in Calgary is, sort of a suburb of the city. So we're city people, and very happy to be here. And Laura can tell you more about maybe a little bit of our home life.
We came here 10 years ago, and then we had 3 children that were still in school. And now all of our kids are out of school. Although I guess some of them are still going to trade school a little bit. But we have 2 kids working for Remuda, which is in Calgary.
Yeah.
So, and a CanRef connection there. Yeah. Yep. And our daughter Tabitha married somebody here in Canada. So we have a true Canadian. She's expecting in January. So we're going to have a Canadian baby. Yeah.
And so you have children still in so Illinois, I guess, right? In Indiana?
Yeah, most of them moved to Indiana now, in Dyer, where Mid-America is, the same community in Dyer, Indiana, and one in Highland. So we have 4 of our older children there, and then all of our grandchildren presently, 11 of them all live there. So we feel that separation, try to get back on occasion to them, and it's just good that, that's still home for both of us, since both of us grew up in Lansing, Illinois, and South Holland, Illinois, very much, again, Dutch communities. And that's, we didn't meet till I was, I think, 18. So we didn't know each other growing up, but then we met there like most couples do at the church.
Yep.
And so that's still home base, but now this is becoming home to us here in Calgary.
Yeah, I guess 10 years.
Yeah, we were in a suburb of Chicago. So the
Okay.
both of us grew up in a suburb of Chicago. So Chicago with over 10 million, Calgary when we came here was like 1.3 million. Now it's 1.6 million. So to us, we came here and it was like, oh, it was this baby city. It was like, it was a city, but it was, and it's wonderful. We both just love Calgary. It's just a really great place to be. And yeah, we've enjoyed the change.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
say it's the biggest small town in the world or something. That's the...
Yeah, when they complain about traffic here,
Oh, yeah.
sometimes I just go drive to it and sit in it again.
Yeah.
Go, no, this is nothing.
Yeah, no, same coming from Southern Ontario around Toronto area. It's just
Oh yeah,
it's madness. So yeah, it's yeah, we love it out here too. It's Calgary's just an interesting city. It's
Yeah.
fun. So I have to ask you though, how do you find the pizza? Because I noticed that was on your bio on the church website. Your favorite foods.
Yeah, pizza is a byword here. It isn't pizza. You know, again, Chicago has Domino's. Chicago has Pizza Hut. That's kind of what it is. We found a few places that it's more palatable, but for the most part, we were just back in Chicago in August, and there's just that moment when we go back and eat. I just ask for silence, just because it's like it all comes back. You're like, this is
man.
so good because it's what you're used to, but also
Yeah.
I just think it's excellent beyond
But we do have like our first charge was in Minnesota and they didn't have good pizza either. So
Oh no.
we were
they had Pizza Ranch.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Recommended to us, they were like, you need to learn how to make your own pizza. So we have done that. And so we make, the only problem is here, we actually get our pizza sauce from Chicago and we fill up our suitcase. We just did that again.
We feel like
we're
running with contraband because our suitcase and my whole golf bag, I had like 12 cans of Pastorelli pizza sauce. So, but yeah, we got through it every time. So
that's
funny.
It's not like the cheeses in Calgary are awesome, but nobody can make pizza sauce like Chicago can.
Where does Chicago get that? Because I'm from Hamilton, and Hamilton is a big Italian community. And again, when we moved here, like it's just like I didn't even really realize that Hamilton had good pizza. But like the pizza, you can get Chicago style pizza there. One of our favorite places to go was a pizza place. It was just next level. I haven't found anything out here that even stacks up. So it's
it's not, you talk about it being Italian. That's most of the places are Giordano's and Aurelio's and San Fratello's. It's all this Italian names, but they've Americanized it too. So, because when you go to Italy and you get these real Italian pizza, we would turn up our nose at that, which it's funny because that's a real pizza probably, but it's because they've had their they've Americanized it or whatever you want to call it to where they have their recipe that we grew up with and you like. And of course, that's not even the deep dish stuff where more like Gino's Pizza downtown and Giordano's makes that too. Lou Malnati's is another deep dish. So those are ones where you have that one big piece and you're like, this is great. And then you try to eat the second one. You're like, this was a really bad idea.
Well, if
I
anyone
can eat two without a problem.
There you go. If any of our listeners need a guide to pizza in Calgary, you know who to call. It's a struggle. So anyways, today
you just come to our house.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go.
We'll make it.
So today we wanted to talk a bit about Summit. You've both been instrumental, I guess, in getting Summit off the ground. Summit for our listeners is a youth conference that's put on every year in Calgary. I believe at Mount Royal University.
Yeah,
but it put on by the URC Church in Bethel, in Calgary, and with cooperation, I guess, from many other URCs, CanRCs around the area, and has grown quite significantly. So maybe I'll give you a chance, maybe just introduce, like, how did this idea come about? And yeah, like how did Summit get off the ground and when did that all happen?
Oh, sure. That's a long answer. So I hope, just to keep the conversation, anytime you want to interject and ask. The first question might be kind of what is Summit? And then that's even changed over the years because Summit used to be sort of synonymous with the week-long conference. So, what we do is we have it on the campus of Mount Royal from a Monday to a Friday. and we can go into the details later, but that used to be what everyone referred to as Summit. And then 3 years ago, we started a young adult conference, where now that's in February. And now people are like, well, are you going to Summit? We're like, well, we really can't call it that anymore, because Summit is now, it's really now, I guess you could say it's undergone a bit of rebranding to where Summit is now the organization that hosts Christian conferences for Reformed youth and young adults, and with a view toward the sort of a vision for the future, which is what we could talk about later too when it expands. But the hope and prayer is that if the Lord so wills, we would be open to continuing to expand it to like marriage conferences. An office bearer training conference is something that all of our churches have felt a need for. And since Summit has the sort of the apparatus, we have the registration site, we have the location. My wife and I work together on a lot of venue planning. We could easily do that. So we anyway. So that's what Summit is now. As far as the way it all began, was sort of on a whim. It was struck up by a conversation that was held by our own council about 2015. Our youth, 2014, I think, the youth in Bethel had attended a convention in the United States called Reformed Youth Services. And that was a very much like a summit style conference that they were having in the States. And the youth from Lethbridge and from Calgary, especially those two churches sort of nearest to the border, were attending. So we were sending our youth flying, driving, and then once they get to the airport or the location, they had to take a bus. Sometimes logistically, it was a nightmare to get there, but it was very expensive as well. And so one of the council members just said kind of, well, this is so expensive. I think we were spending $15,000 to send our youth there, and that was only half the cost. The youth had to meet the other. So part of it was just financial, because it was just logistically and financially getting very difficult. And where was this going to go in the future? And someone said, maybe we should look into starting our own conference, which sort of ended there. But I heard that, and that's kind of all it took, because I thought, hey, that's not a bad idea. So I started ruminating on that. I talked to my wife. We had both been to the Reformed Youth Conferences convention. I have spoken at it probably a half a dozen times. Laura had attended too, and we knew, and the irony too is not the irony, but the good thing is most of our kids from the States had all attended that. Oh, and really? They loved it. So it's like we knew the power of that conference for a week long to be on campus together. So we thought, is there an appetite for that here? Is it possible to plan it? And so it started with I called and
maybe just to interject, the year that we came, there were a lot of people, because our own kids had been to RYS before. So there was a lot of people from our church that did come. And like he said, it was pretty expensive to send them to RYS. And part of that was just because they hadn't had a pastor for a while. So they had like extra money. Right. When you pastor. And so they were like, oh, fine, we'll help pay for them. But then we realized that really in Canada, the Lethbridge church went because they were a big church. They could afford it. They were close to the border. But none of the other churches even knew anything about it. And I think like on the east side, you just have a bigger population. And so you probably had more conferences that you had opportunity to go to.
Yeah, Ontario was definitely more conference heavy.
But here we felt like there was almost no options. And of course, there were study weekends that the Canadian Reformed, but they were a little bit different in their focus. They were maybe not, they were over a Sunday and those kind of things. So we kind of, in our view, coming from the States, we were like, well, we would love to be able to provide something like that. But we realized sending them to, maybe we could have done it for our church. Our church is big, but for the other churches,
Nearlandia is not going to send.
No,
it's too. And anyway, so that began with a conversation we kind of had together, and then I emailed the pastors in it's kind of the nearest to us here in Alberta, and said, guys, if this is an idea, what do you think if we would organize a youth conference? Is there an appetite for that among our churches? Every single pastor replied with like more than positive, very encouraging, excited remarks. And then that kind of began, well, I'll tell you what, let me let me ask the next question. If we did this and we had to do it on sort of, our own expenses, would some of you be willing to speak? Because that's the next thing we have to do a low budget thing. And all of them agreed. So we're like, okay, if we would need them, they would be available.
They did, though, add that they wanted something not just for the young people, like high school age, but they also really wanted something for the young adults. So they were feeling in their churches that the young adults needed to be ministered to as in this kind of way. So,
and that was really remarkable, because we thought too, that's where the other conference in the States, it ended at high school age, and that was it. You graduate high school, you're done. And we thought, hey, there are kids who are still 18 to 21 and maybe even beyond that could use some networking, some friendship building, some spiritual encouragement. So I would say within another week, I just reached out to Pastor Alan Strange from Mid-America and Richard Bout, our mission coordinator. I said, hey guys, if we did something like this, I needed a sort of a main session speaker. Would you think about that? Would you be willing? And they both responded in the affirmative. So, okay, now we got two guys. And we ran with that. And sort of the irony is this was all going on in sort of January, February. And sort of, well, we already kind of have two main speakers and maybe a bunch of these other guys willing. So the next step was to take it to our friends. We thought, let's just ask Laura and Jesse Vink to see what they think, because they're our friends and we wanted to run by them. And if we did it, maybe they'd come alongside of us. So we arranged a lunch at the Subway and said, hey, we have an idea. And we told them, and they said, you're crazy.
Well, they were the young people, like they were counselors for the youth. And they also had been to RYS before. So they had seen it. And I think they were just like, you guys are crazy. Like, don't reinvent the wheel. This is just, there is no way. And it did seem like, I thought, even from my perspective, even though I'm always supporting my husband, right? But from my perspective, I'm like, do you really think that this year we could do it already? Like, I'm almost like, is this even possible? But yeah, God opened all these doors and these guys and the people that, were from the other churches seemed like, no, we kind of agree that this would be a great thing.
Yeah.
So in August, where is it? Here's our first pamphlet so I thought, well, let's start at the beginning. So I don't know, it's probably backwards to you guys, but why are we here? So Alan Strange spoke on that, and it was August 8 through 12, 2016. And we knew God's hand was in that, because just even finding Mount Royal we toured, the other one was Ambrose University, and then Mount Royal. And Ambrose is way too small for what we thought might grow into something fairly big. And sure enough, Mount Royal was the right call. And again, the Lord everything we did opened up, and where, we saw, no, this won't work. We exercised, or we, weighed some other options. And then finally came to our church when we had enough material together for a motion, and Bethel gave us seed money. They approved it overwhelmingly. And I think the big thing behind all this too, Tyler, was that our churches, and maybe it's true in the Canadian Reformed as well, we're not doing well holding our youth and our young adults. We're finding that their friend groups go beyond just our own churches, and then they're sort of networking and not maybe meeting others in church settings, and especially even, for marriage. Not that that's why we did this, but you're trying to find a godly spouse and someone who has the same ideals. And we thought that too has to be what's driving this, is that we want our youth, our young adults, to find others of like mind, like age, in situations where, hey, they can find someone from BC that's struggling with the same issues they are, that, hey, there's a Christian community that goes beyond my little church here or my little church there. And you bring them all together, and they start building friend groups and networking together, and seeing that they're not alone in the Christian faith. And that was part of just that passion for wanting our youth and young adults to meet together, but also to meet their Savior in a way that to acknowledge, hey, their faith is real, right? They're at that age where their faith is being challenged by culture, by world, maybe by other friend groups and ideas. And so we want to meet them at that age group and say, we can bring some pastors in to address these pressing issues, these the breakout sessions are geared toward that. What are you living? What are some of the things you're faced with, trials and temptations and issues that you don't have an answer for? Maybe the Lord can use Summit to address that, so they can, hey, here's some answers.
Do you find it's more in Alberta specifically? Is it, I mean, maybe it's more pronounced in the Canadian Reformed Church. Like, we have churches fairly spread out. Like, I come from Hamilton area, which is like, especially in our Canadian Reform, even the URC, there's just churches everywhere. Like, you drive 5-10 minutes up the road and there's another one. And so there's, like you mentioned, there's a lot more opportunities for conferences and getting together with other youth outside of your own specific congregation. I find in Alberta, like, yeah, especially in the CanRC, like, we have Coaldale, Tabor, then Calgary is 2 hours away. Edmonton is our next closest neighbor.
Your hub.
And I guess similar in the URC, probably, what is it? Lethbridge, Calgary, Ponoka would be.
Yeah, Lacombe, Ponoka.
Lacombe.
We have
so
one
like
in Tabor too.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. There's a little bit closer, but it's but yeah, do you find the distance here is tough? And this is like, is that part of the reason why this is such a beneficial idea?
Yeah, I believe, because even if we go just to describe to you our classes, we call classes Western Canada. We go as far east as Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Oh, wow.
And then so you just chart that Thunder Bay, Ontario. Then there's Winnipeg, a church there. Then there's Regina, Saskatchewan, and now there's another church plant in Saskatoon now. But
cool.
Then you go, so you realize we don't have much in between there, and so then you get here, and every couple of hours there's a URC church, and in Edmonton, probably like Lethbridge, a little bit more of a hub, a few churches. And then beyond that, near Landia, then way up to Grand Prairie. So just in Alberta alone, the beauty of this has been, even, I would say the side benefit, the pastors, both in a Canadian Reformed and URC, when we come to these conferences, Laura and I, we host just almost every night on campus. We get together and just talk, because it's a wonderful thing just to get to meet all these guys and the wives or other speakers that come, or women as well, because we need to just have fellowship. So that was.
Whereas, like what you're saying, where we grew up, and certainly like in Hamilton, you might be doing school stuff with other pastors, and you'd be able to have other times where you just had conversations with them. But for us, the nearest pastor's hours away. You're not going to
no overlap.
You're not going to have that kind of community. And I think it's so true for the youth too. They might just feel like, I know the people in my church, but do I know anybody else that really believes the Bible the same way that I do? And not that there's not many different Christians that they come in contact with, but just to be encouraged that, actually there's a lot of other people that love the Lord the way that I love the Lord, and
do you see that in the conference, that the youth have a feeling that maybe they're isolated? They're like, it's pretty easy to despair of the world.
Yeah.
Like, do you see that encouragement in them? Like when youth come to,
I think a good example is the community that comes from probably Smithers in Houston, which has a very strong community, both URC and Canadian Reformed and Talquah. So you have URC and Canadian Reformed churches together, but they're in a, I don't know what you said, there was like 20,000 people in those.
They're pretty remote in the sense that the whole community is probably under 30,000 people. Well, if you're 5 hours away from anybody else other than that 30,000 people, which I don't know, that maybe doesn't sound like, but for us in South Holland, our one community was 30,000 people. That was like one tiny little community next to another community that's 30,000 next to it. Like, I can't even conceive of that.
But I think what we've seen is these kids come here, and young adults too, I shouldn't call them all kids, but they come here with those chaperones, and they're so excited, I think, to be part of something big, something like, hey, when we come here, similar to what it's like when I go back to Synod and classes on a little bit lower level or different level, smaller level, I love to see my colleagues. I don't get to see them. And here they make friends, and then they get a mix with these people from Calgary, and they're coming from Winnipeg. And if you know something about the Canadian Reformed churches with relatives, there's this connection between Carmen and even Smithers and everywhere in between that they're seeing relatives they haven't seen. So it's a reunion, certainly relatives as well, but even just, I think, church family reunion that we're seeing the growth in interest in Canadian Reformed churches is really exciting. That's kind of the growing aspect of it, and even collectively going forward where Summit's going. But it's amazing for us to sit back and watch every year this happen where, it isn't always, you can't always say that you can see it, but you feel it. There's a beautiful unity that happens in a familiarity. And I think people, again, that say this is my first year, and yet on day 3, they're already feeling like they're at home, which is just God's Spirit working among us, and also the unity of the churches.
Yeah. So how is the vision different between? So you mentioned Calgary Study Weekend, and I understand it's a little bit of a different concept. Like it's shorter for one. I think it's only a few days. Which kind of lends a different flavor or different culture to the event. Like you don't necessarily form those friendships because you're speaking about like by the second or third day they become comfortable. That's when they leave this conference. So and it being over a Sunday, so it's more, I guess, it's shorter, but also I know in the CanRef that event, the Calgary Study Weekend, they fit church in there on Sunday, and that's part of so it seems like a bit of a more of a stunted study. Probably still a good opportunity to meet people, but how is the model of having a whole week? I guess I think it's 4.5 days of study and being together. Like, how is that model different, and how is it beneficial?
I would say this Calgary Study Weekend would line up more closely with what we have with our young adult conference. That starts on a Thursday night in February. We always do it like the weekend, so that the Monday weekend is the day, the Monday holiday, Monday rather, is the day they would travel back, but they arrive on Thursday. Then we have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We worship all together, both services. Then they're supposed to go home Monday, but normally they go to the mountains to ski. So that lines up pretty much like the Calgary Study Weekend. I'm not sure. They stay in hotels. They're not billeting. They stay in hotels, 150 of them. And so they can kind of, but the summer week, it's amazing how quickly it goes. But what we found is that when you have these young people, young adults, and all the chaperones, that they come on campus on that Monday, and you're doing everything. Not that every activity is together, but we have main sessions every day together. You're overlapping those two with Tuesday, Wednesday, our breakout sessions where along with the main session now, there's 4 breakout sessions where they're spending an hour and a half in session or an hour in session with others. You're eating breakfast, lunch, supper, maybe not all together at the same people, but you're seeing each other, sporting events. We found now what people are doing is they're remembering friends, and that they're planning that in advance. Hey, can you be in my soccer team? Can you be in my volleyball team? And then Thursday, of course, they go to the mountains, or they go horseback riding, or whitewater rafting, or Calgary Zoo. So there's all these opportunities during the week for seeing each other, making friendships, and they're also staying in dorm rooms together, not sleeping in the same specific room, but they're together in like an apartment setting where they each have their room, but they're sharing a bathroom, and then they're in sunrise, sunset groups. So I would say,
I would say almost like you're layering it. So it's like, you figure you've got your main session. Of course, that usually we try to get a really great speaker that you're going to have, you're going to be inspired by. But with the breakouts, you're going to have these speakers that you have a little bit more community where you can ask questions with one another. And then every night and every morning, we have them in the same, what we call sunrise and sunset groups. And then they're only about 12 to 13, 14 kids. So you are reviewing the day's events. It's led by a chaperone, but you're reviewing the day's events. You're doing a Bible study that Keith has written that with questions and things that specifically go to the topic of what we're talking about.
Oh, cool.
And I just think it accelerates their ability to be able to really make a close connection, because you're sharing things that are important. You're sharing your heart, you're sharing your faith in these rooms, and you're doing fun stuff. So you're playing sports and you're on a team with someone. So you kind of have both aspects of how you get to know someone in a really fast way.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. By Thursday, so you've got Tuesday where kids have just met the people the night before, you're feeling unsure, you're just maybe like in your group, the chaperone's kind of pulling answers out of you. And then Thursday night, they can't get them to shut up. You know what I mean? Because you're just, and it is, we see this every year, and you are amazed. They're also young. So they're very energetic and they want to meet everybody. They're not.
Yeah, when they go home on Friday, we're finished by 11 a.m. on Friday because everyone has to drive home.
Right.
Not everyone, but people are flying or driving home. And we'll see them sort of in the area by the Bella where everyone says goodbye. And there's so many of them are weeping. And, I know it's an emotional thing. You met all these kids and young adults. Some of them are friends, but others have just met, and they're also very tired because I don't know.
People do weep more when they're tired, so we can't take total credit for the weeping.
They're weeping on the way home, and then saying, "Hey, I miss you," and this and that's been. So that they've really had their hearts and lives touched. Every day there's that worship session too, where we're singing. What I'm amazed by, Tyler, is that when we say what was your highlight, because we always send out a survey, 90% the worship sessions, which to me to us it kind of confirms what we're doing, because if it was just the sports or the whitewater rafting, but
the sports are fun.
Yeah. But it's that idea that being together in a setting, especially in that center in the Bella, where we're able to sing together, pray together. And I open up every session with prayer, but also we try to personalize it, because we know every time there's usually some kind of physical challenges. Some people might be nervous or panic attacks. There's always that. So you don't name names, but you're like, Lord, we know that, this is a tough setting for some of us, and some of us, long to be home. We missed it. And so you're trying to identify or trying to personalize it too, where we know that it's hard to be here, but overwhelmingly we're trying to support everybody. And it's just so those sessions are really nice, and we have a lot of fun.
And I also think if you are going to take a week, like most of these kids are working, not everybody, some of them are younger, but most of them are working. So you're sacrificing a week of pay. You are sacrificing the money it costs to go there. Now we feel like it's a great return on the money, because we have a lot of sponsors. So it's like we do, you're basically only paying for what you're eating and sleeping in. But it is something where you're just like, you're sacrificing. So you hope that you're getting something back for it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I think that's overwhelmingly you hear positive things, obviously. What has the size done? So I know it's grown. I've heard it's grown. And I think some of your promotional material even shows how much it's exploded over the year. Was that part of the idea? Like, you speak to the you mentioned how the kids are excited to be part of something big, seeing like many other young people who are Christians and alive for the gospel. Was that the goal going into it, or
I think
is it something
that first year, I remember us being like, oh my goodness, we have 65 people that signed up, because at first you don't know.
Watching the registration totals, right?
You're thinking it's going to be 11 or something.
Yeah. Are we going to have anybody that wants to do this thing? And we did. The first year we ended up with 160 kids, but we had very few chaperones, because we didn't it's harder to get chaperones. We didn't have a clear rule for, if you're going to come, you need to have chaperones. So we praised God that nobody died, and we kept track of everybody by the end.
Our first main session, at the end, I asked young adults to come forward, because that's the other thing. The young adult interest and participation has been relentlessly consistent. It's almost like every single one, you get between 40 and 60 young adults that come. That's post high. And they're taking you talk about people working, they're taking a whole week of work off, a vacation week, and then spending that much money to come. But it's so that first time we said if you're high school late or post high, please come forward. And we said, okay, here's the deal. We need chaperones. So we started assigning who would volunteer to lead one of the studies, because it was just neat that, we could do that and be that relaxed. And that's kind of stayed with us. We're very much on the spot, use people, and they want to be used and help. That's tremendous.
But anyway,
but the growth is
170 was the second year. We had like 175. Then the third year we grew to like 225. Maybe even higher. The third year was,
I think the year after COVID, we were shocked because that was 2021, I think. And one year we were limited in the number simply because of the COVID regulations. When we had to take it to 2022, I believe, was an old campus. We had to do that because Mount Royal still had a vaccination requirement on campus. And that kind of was the first year we're like, whoa, this thing went to 350 in a hurry. And so that was like big.
We had to.
That's a good sized church.
Yeah, that year we had the room that they had, their largest, what they called was an amphitheater, was 390, and we had 392 people that year. And we couldn't believe it. That, and the year before that was the year that was kind of COVID restrictions, so we had to have like only half the amount for twice the space, so we had to cap it at like, I think we capped it at like 260. So we didn't really know that we were going to the next year have another 150. Like it was crazy.
And then the last 2 years of Mount Royal have been, again, not alarmingly, but surprisingly larger crowds. We had 442 this year, and the year before we had 450. But when people ask about numbers too, there was never a goal in mind. We just said we wanted to be able to handle the interest in terms of that. We know we need to gain support among the churches for this. That's because I can go into the financing of it too. There's a lot here that the kids pay for. They pay for their entire conference, what they eat, where they sleep, and their out day, and sort of the t-shirts that they get. But where that conference is hosted, because it's hosted at a venue where we need to have a big room, where we need to have breakout session rooms, where we need access to gymnasiums and even the pool. We don't need the pool, but it's kind of nice. That's where the churches come in to pay for that. But the whole thing about the numbers is like, it's never been a number thing where we know we'll probably have to cap it at one point because our committee can only handle so much.
Yeah.
So we've had a cap at the last 2 years at 450 because Mount Royal, even though technically they have more rooms than 450, they just haven't had them available. Like last year, they had one dorm that was kind of closed down. So we've had to say 450 both years was the most that we could have. So I think feasibly, we probably could at Mount Royal host maybe up to 500, depending on whether we could get that many dorm rooms. But you can't, we just don't have a space any bigger than that. So then it would have to be.
That's huge. That's like, do you find a benefit in that size? Like, if you have 500 kids, it's pretty hard for like one kid to meet, 499 other ones. Like, is there a size that's nice? Do you find that the young people kind of find even like people of like interests, like the sports people and the chess people are doing their thing, and like there's not a ton of time for that all to occur, I guess, and some of it, I guess, is scheduled or structured by the committee, right? To
and I'll give my take on that. Laura can add too, but I just use maybe an example. We get a group every year that comes from Burlington, Washington, and from the States, from the United Reformed Church there, and they used to go to the conference or the convention in the United States. That was that RYS. Right. They said they no longer wanted to go because it got to be over 600. Now it was 850 this year. So that, by way of comparison, that's probably just we're just under sort of half or just over half that size, which, again, we're not we're not in competition with that. We don't want to be 800 either. But the reason they said they didn't like that is because their kids just got lost in that group. And I wanted to remember that, because in striving, a bigger, better number, that's not necessarily a good thing for us. I think where we are now, we still have a sense of community and family among the groups that come. I agree with you that the challenge is there are still those that, could feel left out, because it encourages, perhaps not by design, but by accident or almost by human nature, the clickiness that you get sometimes between this age group. So I think the challenge is there that could happen, but then we kind of come along, and what we do is we also tell chaperones, keep your eye out for this in your group. If you see one person in your group of 10 or 12 isn't responding, doesn't walk in with someone, that's when you can kind of say, hey, I'm going to speak to someone who's more outgoing. Hey, let's include them. It doesn't always work. I've tried it myself, but so we do keep an eye on that. But so did you have a?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Of obviously you can't meet 450 people. We find that like at the very beginning, we felt like, oh, we almost could know everybody. Whereas now a lot of times we might go to a church and so they'll come up and give me a hug and just be like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking,
do you remember that person?
Like I think I do. Give me more, but
you have a Summit keychain. That's good.
Yeah.
But I do. So that I think that's like a great overall thought to make sure that you be careful of. Is there, and I know I know I'm not making sense here, but the first year we had 160. And I remember the main speaker was just saying how great it was to have this smaller community where you really did feel like you're learning together, you're responding together. And we kind of have that with Ariak, because we have 150 at Ariak, and it's a lovely number. Like we can't fit any more than 150. It's like around maybe 160.
But you would walk through the crowd within 3 days and see enough faces, and maybe not again all the names, especially with me with names, but
that's why they wear name tags.
Yeah, right. But you can get a familiarity, whereas now even at Summit, where you're standing there sort of on stage and making announcements, it's a sea of people, it's a sea of faces, and you recognize the ones that have come before or your own group from your church, but beyond that. And that's why I still try to get out there. So we're very much, and this is, as a side, I don't know if we'd ever get to this in a conversation, but the pastors who speak ask me, well, what about this? What can I do? We're like, we encourage you, get in the tournaments, play a game, get on a team, go on an out day, because this is how you get to know the youth, not just in your church, but around that. And they get to know you, and they get to know, hey, Pastor Davis, wow, he's not such a
He's a great basketball player,
he's not such a stodgy guy after all, or and then
or isn't a good basketball player, one of the other two.
Right.
Yeah. But it's to be real, and hey, you're just a guy, you're just a mom, you're just a pastor's wife who comes, and they identify with that. And that's another one of the big things. It was so nice to play soccer and to see my pastor sit down on the floor and talk to 5 kids. And it's so, again, just to put that together in a context of we're just, we just want to form relationships, have fun together, enjoy fellowship. A lot of times pastors too, they'll sit down, and sometimes it's just pastors, but you'll get kids that sit down with the pastors because they might have arranged to ask questions and say, well, let's have lunch together. Well, again, how often does that happen?
Right. Yeah. I guess the young people being able to see see themselves one day in, maybe not being a pastor, but in reflections of that, guess takes the pastor off the pulpit. I guess it doesn't happen a lot in a church community. So, I mean, the sports is actually sports sometimes get a bad rap for things, but I mean, I think that's a good context to allow pastors to interact with young people. I think that's from what I've heard, it seems like a really cool opportunity.
We've teamed up with some of the guys from BC, oh, come on, Steve, all the bishops, and they've helped us play. The pastors will play the champion women's basketball team because the guys, let's not go there. So, and we've never beat the girls, but it's because these girls from Lethbridge are very, very good. We didn't do that this year because most of the pastors were either too wounded or broken to play. But hopefully we can. But there too, just it's fun, and we get a chance to be together and just have a great time. And the sports is a great vehicle also, just to let these kids, because they have to be tired at the end of the day. They have to be feeling like they need to go to bed, because if they don't go to bed, we found 2 a.m. is hard to be staying up and then getting up at 5:30, 6 o'clock the next day. So we try to tire them out so they do stay in their beds.
Yeah, our two conferences are quite different. Like the summer conference, we have it very, very closely structured. So it's like you've got 20 minutes to get to the next thing or whatever. And there's lots and lots of activities that are all planned for you. So it's easy for you to sign up. If you know how to play volleyball, you will just get thrown on a team with other people. So you feel like, well, then you get to know those other 5 people, and same with soccer, floor hockey, all those kind of things. But in ARIAC, because that's the young adults conference, it's very much the other way, where they have lots of freedom. We have lots of opportunities to do things, but you're an adult. So we don't need to be telling you, if you want to go to bed at 9 o'clock, you go to bed at 9 o'clock, whereas you actually can't go to bed until the sunset groups are done. And there's been some complaints about that because
they're like, it's way too long. You have to let us go to bed by 10:30, 11 o'clock. We're like, nope.
Well, that's how that works out. Yeah. And you can tell that there are some people that, for young adults, when you're a kid, you don't need sleep. You can sleep when you get back. Whereas when you're a young adult, sometimes you're like, why would I want to be tired all day?
Yeah. That turns that fast, just in a few years.
Yeah.
That's I thought that was when you were like deep into your 30s. That's when that started. So
actually for us, we're just about at the point where we're smart enough to want to go to bed on time.
Yeah, I don't think I'm there yet.
It turns differently for each person, right?
Yeah, that's fair. That's cool, because I mean, I guess people are spending money to have these kids there, just push them for the week, and I mean, they'll look back fondly on the suffering. So that's good. So how do you I guess, does this come from the organizational group? Like, how do you pick the topics for the week? And then I guess you're counting on volunteer ministers and speakers and things. How do you pick what's of interest for the week and all the topics that people get to study? And is there choice for people to study, or is it just kind of an assigned schedule?
Yeah, in this regard, and this is why I really appreciate Bethel, my church, and the latitude which they give to me. A lot of this is just born of ideas. I drive around and visit, and then something pops in my head. So pretty much I've come up with maybe not every topic, but a lot of the topics every year. And then I run that by my wife, by our committee. My wife serves on our organizing committee. And we now have 2 different committees. We now have a young adults committee and the Summit Conference Committee for the summer conference. So in both cases, a lot of times I'll come up with the idea and then just tweak it from there. So just to give an example, I was really thinking about doing a sermon series on the attributes of God. And it's about 2 years in the making. So I got a books by Terry Johnson, and some of the books that he was studying as well, Stephen Charnock on the attributes of God. So I was reading that, studying that. And then we heard Terry Johnson speak at a Mid-America conference. And I just like, you know what, we got to do a conference on the attributes of God. And guess what? This last year was Behold Our God. And 2 years ago, we asked Terry Johnson if he would speak, and Eric Watkins, who was my in to Terry Johnson. And so that was born of that. And then while I was thinking of that, I said, what's a good backup after that would be worship, because when you find out how awesome your God is, the response to the attributes is always worship. So that's why this year it's the attribute. We're doing for 2025, Joel Beakey and Jerry Bilks will be coming out to speak on worship. And so that kind of dovetailed. And then for 2026, I've already got the topic of, I haven't the title yet, but the topic on the person of the Holy Spirit, because I think that's where, again, we want to engage that in terms of faith and the building of faith. And so I've got some ideas already for main session speakers. So that part's on me a little bit, which I enjoy.
Right.
Seeing with
and some of those came out of like the second year we did faith, not fear.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid. And people were asking questions with not being afraid to share their faith. Hey, we want to know more about apologetics. So then the third year, it was like, are you ready? And that was because people were kind of asking about it.
Right. Yeah.
And then after that, I think it was Reverend John Van Eyck, that had said, in my sessions, these people don't really understand who Christ is. Like, so the fourth year, we ended up doing, who do you say that I am? Like it was about
Christ's question to his disciples, who do you say I am? And so it's born of the conversations and then we kind of just think about that. And this is the nuance as well that we wanted to bring to this, as opposed to what we've seen at other conferences where it's like, oh, you have a main heading and the main sessions are all connected, but the breakout sessions are like money and dating and all this. But we wanted to connect it together so that what's going on in the breakout sessions is sort of echoed on the main sessions and vice versa. So that's where the real work comes in. So I network with the main speakers. We get on Zoom calls like this, and we hammer out those breakout sessions so that not every one of them, but so that we know where we're going. And that's where, again, the work I do is I come up with teasers and topics, and then I let pastors choose those instead of saying, hey, what do you got to offer? You want to speak? Well, what do you want to speak on? And then it's not connected. And so that has really been the last 4 years. And just that interconnectedness overlapping has not gone unnoticed, that there is a cohesiveness to that, where I think as much as you put into it by way of organization, that's what you're going to get out of it. So
and just on that same note, like you were asking, what choices do they have? So they all do the same Bible study that he wrote that all has to do with the topic. They all go to the same main sessions, but at registration, they get to choose from, like this year we had 14 different breakouts. They only go to 4 of them.
Right.
So they get to choose what 4 they go to. And then thankfully we have somebody that is involved with our committee that is a major logistics king. And so he can take all of their choices, throw them all together, and somehow spit out where they're in the right sessions at the right time.
Wow. That's a chore for 450 people. That's that's cool. I like that. I hadn't thought about the cohesion between the conferences from year to year. That's pretty interesting. Like, I understand that the main session, it's really nice if the main session and the breakout sessions are similar or along the same threads. Because I mean, from having attended similar conferences when I was younger, hearing a topic, even in a sermon on a Sunday, you have all these questions, but then you don't know what to do with them. And if things are disconnected, like, you go to a, it might be nice. Yeah. Like what you said, like money or dating, or, you might have a breakout on evolution or something, but it's completely aside from the main topic. You don't get a chance to ask those questions. And I think that's really wise, I guess, especially, advice for other conference organizers.
Yeah. And I don't know, again, sometimes it lends itself to, like, this year was the attributes of God. And I'd say this is one of the easiest years I've had to put together. I just started with, God is whole. Every breakout session was God is something. God is holy. Just God is, his self-existence. God is unchanging. God is truth. God is wrathful. That's what Dr. Wendell. So I just go down the list and say, here's the attributes here, the teasers, you choose. And so, but it won't always be like that. And it's not always that easy. And it doesn't have to always be that connected. And sometimes I think random, we'll just have maybe 1 year, this is like random thoughts.
Absolutely. Like Pontiac was a little bit different. Like, so the first The first REAC we did was counting the cost. And I think that came mainly out of maybe we were just kind of sharing that but now because we have only young adults and Keith and me on the REAC committee, then they kind of share what is it that they
have
are
more
interested. So so 2 years ago, they were just like, how can we get connected to the body of Christ? Because sometimes young adults, if they're not married, don't feel like they're really they're not getting used by the church.
Not part of the
So
church.
it's like you're not in high school anymore. So I thought that was beautiful. It's like, and it was really challenging, that idea of staying connected to the body. Last year that we did set apart, like holiness. They were thinking of godliness, holiness. And this year they came up with another topic.
Yeah, they want to do maturity in Christ. And so Reverend Murphy and his wife are coming up in New York again. And the young adults just really drive that one more. Just, hey, what do you guys? And they're, again, they're older. They're, we want to engage them in some things that they're facing in their own maybe Christian life and outlook on things. And so it's really interesting.
And they don't get breakout sessions at REAC. So at REAC, instead of doing that, we have discussion groups after the main session. So everybody goes to the main sessions, and then you break up into discussion groups. And then usually the speaker will give us some topics. And sometimes it'll just be prayer too. There's usually we have one discussion group time that is just a prayer time, worship time. We spend a little bit more time like that on.
Right. And the other thing about the young adults group, that's, when we talk about topics, and Reverend Murphy presented 2 or 3 of them, and one was specifically about singleness and maybe the dating life, that kind of thing. And they totally rejected that. And that goes to one of your questions that you put out there, because, we joke a lot about, this being, hey, you can meet your life. Well, wonderful if you do, but we've always described that as a wonderful, benefit or side benefit, a consequence of being at a conference like this. You might meet that person that is going to be your spouse. The one year, 2 years ago, people met, and within 12 months, 1 calendar year, 3 of them were already married that they had met.
Oh, wow.
They never met. So it happens. But again, this isn't like we're not doing this as one Ken RC person from I think the Smithers Read said, so is this like a meat market? And at the time I said, no, I'm trying to defend this vigorously. This is not a meat market. And yet I remember the very next day on the buses going to whitewater rafting, there was all this applause. And what's going on? Well, someone just proposed to someone else on the bus, and it wasn't anything related to what they had just, they were a chaperone couple or whatever. But it was just so funny because, how do you defend this when there are so many marriages? And but again, it wasn't overtly for that reason. And the young adults were self-conscious about that too, because they realize that there are those who come that may be single, and that they're finding contentment in that, and that it hurts too when you want a spouse, and if you're always playing that game, and then well they didn't meet a spouse again, but others did. So I think you have to be sensitive to that, and we don't want to come off like we gave you every opportunity, you struck out again. No,
right.
You're here to build relationships. And especially to build that relationship with Christ. And we want the church to be strong and healthy in relationships, whether that's, again, personal friends or beyond that too, but especially the relationship that they have with the church and with Christ. Mainly, that's kind of where we're geared.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. We actually, like, going through that phase of life. I didn't meet my wife at a conference, but I had friends who we would joke about it while we were doing it. We organized one actually as a young people's group in our church. And we used to joke. We joked about it from the beginning when we started organizing it. And a few of my friends, one in particular, we would continually like make fun of that. And actually at that conference, she met her husband.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
The man who became her husband. And so that's like a running joke with us, but it was an opportunity. Like, I kind of struggled with it. Like I this is helpful though, like what your comments, because you don't want to put the pressure on these types of events, but on the other hand, they hold so much importance, especially something of this size. And in this context of a bit more of a detached church community, in in Alberta, like it's just, we're all spread out all over the place.
Yeah.
Having these events, especially centered around the gospel and around like coming together as Christian young people. Yeah, like the people who arrive at these places have the same desires from a faith perspective. And so it is such a nice place to meet somebody.
Yeah.
But then yeah, I understand the pressure, like you don't want to be going into it with the expectations, right? So
and I got not all kinds of grief, but a little bit of grief because I was interviewed for that article that was written in the New Perspectives magazine, and it was about Summit. And I did that. I had no idea that the entire article, or the entire magazine rather, was going to be about like how to find your spouse. And so had I known that, I probably would have said, don't put that in that issue. But it was just, again, I was interviewed and I just explained some things, and then I saw the title and I thought, oh no, here we go.
yeah.
But so maybe a chance to clarify that a little bit, that I had no idea. But again, we're not about getting people married. We're about having people, grow in their faith, grow in their love for the Lord, and making those relationships, whatever they might be and wherever they might go. But we're blown away when we went up to Neerlandia a couple of years ago I had to preach and do an exchange there. So Laura went with me, and after church, we're meeting, the people, and we know some of them. And there's this couple in the back, and we recognize them, and they had 2 children already. They were from one of the first conferences, and I'm standing with my mouth up like, what? But yeah, they met at
And then
Summit.
their father is like thanking us because this daughter-in-law of his is just this wonderful girl, and they wouldn't have met,
Yeah,
right.
and
she came from Smithers or Tulsa or Houston.
There is something to be said about that. You are most likely meeting other people that have the same love for the Lord as you do. So you are going to have maybe a deeper beginning point, and you might end up meeting that person. But yeah, it's not. Yeah, we're not performing any marriages at Summit.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not like you have a license for that.
I do.
Right, but not like Vegas or
No. I'll break out the Elvis Presley costume.
We have to decide, because Ariak, obviously you have a bunch of young adults. A lot of them did end up getting married. Like one of them on our committee met a girl there who actually had said specifically she didn't want to meet anybody. And then of course she meets this guy, and before the next
11 months
they had gotten married. So wow. We did have to talk about the Ariak is only for young adults, like Singles. If you're married already. And that's why, and then a lot of people have been asking us, oh, well, we would still like a spiritually encouraging weekend or a spiritually encouraging week. And that's why
as married couples.
Yeah.
It's because it's funny too. And this is some of the culture in the Canadian Reformed churches that we're trying to learn from. And even in the URCs, the definition of a young adult is different than the US definition. It was always post-high. And also in the States, it was usually post-high single. Here it's been, oh no, young adults. I think in Parkland, Ponoka, they had a fundraiser, and their young adults included married couples, which I think is sort of a beautiful thing, that you can include that in that same age group. So we that's why kind of the heart is to eventually open up something where we can have a conference of young marrieds or married couples too, so that there could be more of a expanding that reach and the desire to participate in that.
Yeah, and some of that just comes out of like what is the interest? Like when we hear from people that are like, well, we would really like something like this. Well, then you're like, well, maybe that is possible. Yeah. Maybe that's something that, because our committee just loves it when we come up with ideas.
Yeah.
You're like, we're trying to be more busy. No, that's interesting. Do you find it like, as a church community, married couples are easier integrated into, like, there are events, even something like, I remember when our first son was born, even something like going to the nursery in church to drop the kid off. Something as simple as that is it kind of exposes you to new friends, I guess, like in the church. Is that something that is a bit of a difference when from young adults, like to married young adults? Like, does the church deal with it better?
Yeah, that's a good question. When you're a couple, you've already have a person, so in that sense, you've already got that person that you're able to spend your life with. So there's a connection there that a single person doesn't have. But then I think also that couple can be lonely if they're in a church where they don't have children, and that exactly what you said, the children connection puts them in a lot of familiar situations with other parents with children. So, and maybe that couple that might be, without children for whatever reason for a couple of years, maybe that or disconnected from that. So yeah, that maybe does lend itself to, on one hand, those who do find that fellowship in the churches, they have that, maybe others don't. So I think it's the same thing. You're going to find some couples that still are feeling disconnected. I don't know. But that's always the thing too. Wood Summit, we always wanted to, we want to be able to provide something if the churches want it, if the churches sense the need. That has been really what's driving Summit all along. We don't want to just say, here's a conference, come. It's like, no, if the churches are saying, hey, we really see in our churches there is that craving among young couples to find the spiritual growth beyond maybe the Bible studies that they're involved in. So I don't know, trying to find that, where's that sweet spot? Where are the churches really needing some help? Office bearers training, I think, is huge. That's across the board. So, but maybe it's hard because once you do introduce children to a relationship, now what do you do if you go to Canmore for a weekend or for a 2-day Friday, Saturday conference? What do you do with the children? Who's going to watch them? So, there's that other thing too. Summit has now a babysitting service.
Yeah, that's just a breakout session for some people.
Yeah, toddlers go over here in a padded room with toys.
That's right. Interesting. So I don't know how many other questions I have. One that comes to mind would be the growth, or where do you see this going? And then do you have any advice for any other conference? I know there's conferences in, or conference organizational groups in Ontario. I mean, I'm sure all over the West here too. Do you have any advice for them? And then also, do you see Summit, the model, or even like just using the model to coach other conference, Christian conference groups, growing beyond Calgary?
Yeah. So let me, on the growth aspect of it, we're finding that as we go along, we're trying to keep our organizational level consistent with the growth of the conference. And so we, last night, I think I could share this kind of a historic moment for Summit. Our church council voted in approval of the articles of incorporation that a proto board committee has drafted. In this proto board committee, it consists of United Reformed and Canadian Reformed individuals. I sit on it, but only because I'm the executive director of Summit. As of last year, my church kind of said, we want you, Keith, we want you as a pastor to be involved in this. So they're allowing me to commit 30% of my time to Summit. So it's kind of growing in that direction. Like there's actual quantifiable, financial investment in it from a director's point of view now.
Right. Oh, cool.
It doesn't really, my
so
wife.
You're getting breaking news.
Yeah.
Real talk.
Look at that.
Breaking news.
Yeah. Breaking news. So,
breaking news.
And this proto board committee has been great because we see the future of Summit is definitely both Canadian Reformed and United Reformed churches together. And we're serving the youth of our churches. And it's so funny because when they come on campus, no one's wearing the banner, the flag of their federation. We're all there as friends. And these men that we know and women that we know are great friends. And so I don't even know what churches they're from necessarily. I have to be reminded of that, which is the way I want it to be. But we're doing this collectively together because we want this organization to be here beyond my lifetime or beyond my span as a director, or obviously you grow out of it. And they want the same thing for their kids and grandkids. So it's growing on a board level, Lord willing. Next, if this all gets approved, it'll be a charitable organization with CRA, and then we'll be able to establish a board for it to run it. Where our council is doing it now, we want the board to be able to establish control or governorship of it. As far as the question about expansion beyond that, I have really, I prayed about it too. We can't outgrow the potential of or the ability of our current committee to run conferences. So knowing that, I've had to put the brakes on a few ideas, but I have really explored bringing Summit. I want to say this gently. I don't want to alarm anybody in Ontario, but I would love to see a Great Lakes Summit, so we have Western Canada, but now I believe something like Summit would go over really well. When we were in Hamilton, I was considered on call there. We toured, is it Redeemer College there?
Yep.
Yeah. And we toured that with the purpose of where could we hold this main session? Where could we have our events? And, it couldn't be probably as big as we have it here because that facility isn't as large, but I think there's an appetite. The Hamilton Church actually said that too. They would love to see Summit. But again, all of this is in God's timing and God's leading. And also with I think the sensitivity, we don't want to step on the toes of organizations like Tamarack. And even here, when we started, and this is ignorance, I didn't know much about the study weekends. I didn't know much about that. And so it's not like, hey,
the step program
or the steps or the stepping stones. I didn't know that. So we did this like, hey, let's do that. But I think now I'm more familiar with that. And so we want to be sensitive to the programs, to the conferences that are there. And again, because so much of the work is done by our local Bethel, Bethel is all the members that are part of our conference committee that are doing the website work that are, the websites now is kind of outsourced a bit more, but it all is our church. And every time I have an idea, I have to remember that takes time, commitment, more resources, more energy, and we're at our very limit right now.
But what you were talking about, kind of like, could it be a template for others? I think in the States, in California, there's an Abide Adult Conference or Young Adult Conference that they are almost like not selling, but saying, okay, you can like kind of buy into this and you can create the same conference in your area. It's not as large. It's not as, over as many days, but that is a good question. Like, could you do that? Could other people say, hey, here's your template? And ironically, when we first started this, we just kind of asked RYS, hey, can you just tell us what you do? Like, we kind of knew it because we had both been there, but you don't always know all of the organizational things. And I don't think they really wanted to share it with us because I think they felt like, hey, we've developed this thing. And I get that, like you've put time and effort into developing it. They had a full-time director. And I think it was just kind of like, but I think we think differently about it. I think for us, we would love to kind of share the information that we have learned. And
ideally we take this and say, hey, well, I'm willing to go there. We're willing. Laura, by the way this works is, Davis here, you can think of all the speakers and all the topics, but Laura is the one and the rest of the committee that does all the logistics on how to run this at a conference level on a campus. So that's where Laura is just a genius about things. And she leads the singing she does the talent show. So she does a lot too with our committee involved in all of that so that the committee is running the conference. It would be wonderful to say, hey, we can go to Ontario and organize and help. We'll be there for the first conference, but then the idea isn't we want a monopoly and all of that. No, we would want to say, we want you to do that regionally because we think this is something that can be repeatable. If we can do it here, you guys can do it there. And some of it is just like, just have fun, do things together. Our committee that organizes this, we have a blast when we meet. And it's just like, it's hard work, but you're going to make mistakes. You're going to forget things. Learn from your mistakes year by year. Try to get better organizationally. And we're not looking, when you say, well, what kind of people need to be in your committee? We're like, people that you like, that you can get along with well, but also let the Lord, he works in that where you put together a bunch of couples and unforeseeable to us. It's like, oh, wow, they had skills I never knew about. Everything we've done so far is just like the proto board too. I just picked the people. I'm like, hey, I think that'd be great to have those guys on it because they're from there, and there. And all of a sudden you find out that the Lord has equipped them in these unique ways. That's the fun part about figuring all this out. So we would just say to another, to answer your question, we would say to any other group, just put together people and start putting your heads together and pray. Pray for the Lord to lead, to guide, to equip, to show you the way. And don't be afraid to venture something and fail. Don't be afraid to look for alternatives, but let that vision sort of like, just kind of build some momentum and excitement. And if it excites you enough and brings you joy, pursue that. What a lot of people don't, I've explained this a few times, but the very reason I went into the ministry, when I knocked on the door of Mid-America, when they're in Orange City, Iowa, I said, I want to be a youth pastor. and they said, well, that's not kind of what we do here. But, I was still in that CRC mentality. I want to learn to play guitar. I want to be a youth pastor. I want to sit and sing Kumbaya.
Well, he's not a very good guitar player.
I don't play guitar. I don't sing. But they said, hey, why don't you be a minister? And then you can minister to the youth in the most important way possible. So I did that. I went back home and I started my undergraduate work. In 4 years, I showed up by this time they moved to Dyer. I said, hey, I did all my undergraduate work. And they're probably like, who are you? We don't remember you anyway. So, so I started in 25 years. Well, it's fewer than 25 years, but like 20 years later, the Lord would bring me to this point in the ministry where now the reward of this is an amazing experience being involved in Summit and Bethel again, seeing that I have a passion for this, but also just letting me, it's sometimes at the expense of some of the other pastoral work, but letting me pursue this because they see this is so important for the youth of our churches. It's why our church is calling a second pastor too, because they see there's merit in the ministry. And it is a ministry we're having to the youth and young adults. So again, that's something, if it could be duplicated elsewhere, we'd love to be a resource because we don't want to keep it to ourselves. We want to say, hey, again, if Pastor Davis and Laura, if we could do this, really anybody can that has a passion, a desire, a drive.
I mean, we could do this every other week. If we had 1 week to sleep in between, we could do it the next week.
It is amazing. To be on campus in those. Now I need probably 2 weeks in between, but
that's just because you're pushing so hard with no sleep.
It's more than people would not believe. Well, those who have been there believe it. When we're out at 2:30 on a Thursday night, giving the kids a little bit more leeway on the night before they have to leave. And then you get home on Friday and you're just like, I'm going to sleep for 3 days.
Well, I think that might be a great place to leave it. I appreciate appreciate the work. I think it's something great that the Lord has built with you, leading this initiative here. And yeah, blessings on it. Hope it grows and that it has blessings beyond just Alberta, just Calgary, Western Canada, and can go beyond that. That's amazing. I don't know if there's anything else you think we missed or wanted to add.
How old is your oldest one, Tyler?
Oh, not too old yet. He's just started kindergarten, so he's 5.
Okay, so you know what? 9 more years, and he'll be at Summit.
I'm looking for a replacement, Tyler. So there you go. So we just appreciate
I'm doing
your
my work
time
on the school board for now, and
all right,
get that going.
Finished.
That's right. But
we appreciate your time, and it's a privilege to talk. If anyone says, hey, can we get you on to talk about Summit? I love that. I think my kids in Chicago get a little tired of it because we normally go there right after the Summit conference, and all we talk about for 3 days. We're like, okay, Mom and Dad, that's enough about Summit. But you've allowed us to do that, and we thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, Tyler. Thanks.
Yeah, what a blessing. Yeah. So, Pastor Keith and your wife, Laura Davis, we thank you. Thank you to everyone who's listening. If you're inspired by this and you'd like to, come to Summit, there's the adult conference coming up in February, I guess. We hope to record this maybe in the summer, but we missed the summer, so it's coming out in the fall. But next summer, of course, for the youth, the youth conference
This
again.
is what you have. Oh, you can't see that because it's the opposite way, but
Oh,
And it's
that'll
gonna be a little bit-
that might come out. Yeah, it's summitrefcon.org. If you're
Yes.
looking at that, we'll link all the stuff for Summit too in the description of the episode. And then
Awesome.
if there's any conference organizers listening, you now have a resource to reach out for some good advice. So much appreciated. Blessings on your work.
thanks.
Appreciate it. Blessings to you too. Thanks.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Just a quick shout out to our sponsor for this episode, Redeemer University. You could check them out at redeemer.ca. Thanks to them for making this episode possible. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Real Talk. In partnership with Reform Perspective, this show is created and produced by Tyler Vanderwood, Lucas Holtfleur, and Mariah Tamiga. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen or watch the show. If you have any feedback for us or ideas for future guests or topics, please let us know. You can reach us at reformedrealtalk@gmail.com. Be sure to also follow us on social media. You can search Reformed Real Talk on any of the platforms. We should come right up. Also, leave us a review, preferably a 5-star one, on any of the podcast platforms. That would be greatly appreciated. That's all for now, folks. Keep having real talk.